And good evening. It's October 3rd, 2024, and welcome back to another season, another episode of Sons of the Father. We're continuing our discussions on The Chosen. This is Season 4, courses created by Dallas Jenkins. Tonight, we're going to continue exploring Season 4 with Episode 5, Sitting, Serving, Scheming. And this is our Part 2. Because during this series, my dad, John Warren, my brother Jim Warren, and I, we're going to converse. And we're going to reflect on things that have impacted us as we've watched this series. So, welcome to Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet. And of course, before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, please click the subscribe button. The reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, it's when you click that like button, because that's how YouTube will share them to more people if they wish. So all the video discussions that we have, as well as other topics and more, they can all be found at TheDustyFeet.com. Sitting, Serving, Scheming, Part 2. And we must remember that this is a storyteller's story. This is not a reaccounting. That's important as we walk forward through this series. So, that said, guys, Daddy will start us off.
Scheming seems to be the bigger theme of the episodes, from what I can see. And where we left off and where we're beginning this week, the groups are still verbally dueling, but they both see the advantage of their partnership. So, like in every partnership, you are always trying to get the 51% of it, or the 55, or the 62, whatever it is. But I think as I'm watching this, I'm thinking of how the church or Christian business that I was in for a long time, and that how you can get sucked into that part of it very easily if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
You're constantly fighting what's what's a business partnership and what's a Christian partnership, especially because we were dealing internationally, so you've got a lot of cultural things involved in it and all. But I, as we talked about last time, I really enjoyed this episode, and Jesus is telling the story about the vineyards and the workers, and the setting that he's just. I've heard the story 1,000 times since I've been going to church, and I have never pictured a setting like he was in with the gang hanging out, and he's telling the story wrapped around really partially involving Martha and Mary. It seemed like he was almost spinning off of that to a degree, and and how the apostles were taking sides. They were grumbling and mumbling among themselves. Hey, wait a minute, and he said, somebody, I forget which one it was, said, I want to be that last group. You know, worked for an hour, got the whole days. Just the reality of some of the of what went on then, but what goes on if we're not careful. That's when I was volunteering, it made it so much easier because it didn't make any difference. I wasn't getting paid anything. I was volunteering my time. So it didn't make any difference if somebody else got something because I'm going in, I wasn't getting anything. And it shows you how quickly we can change
Yeah.
as those servants did that, hey, wait a minute, because they automatically felt they were going to get more. because they had worked longer. And then Jesus goes right into to Martha and Mary. And I thought the way that Dallas handled it, personally, I liked it. The way that he kind of balanced the two, and he said both are important, but the key, the main thing, and it's where your mom and I are at, is what is Jesus saying? All the other things are okay, but what is Jesus saying to me? What is Jesus saying to her? What are we getting out of what we're studying? And to me, that is very important to for us at our stage in life and everything. We're really on the connecting with Jesus, reading Scripture, but really connecting with Jesus and what He has to say to us in our lives. Should I be worried about what somebody else is doing? Man, when I used to go down that road, that's a talk about a narrow road. That'll suck you in a hurry. If somebody else is, how much money do you make? What do you mean you want to go out and do this? We're only given so much money, and we can't be on a mission trip, and you can't be
Mhm.
going off and doing this or that. All those things that this I think this episode is addressing in so many different ways. What goes on in lives and ministry when we start looking at somebody doing more, as in Martha and Mary, or somebody getting paid more, as in servants. And I'm getting cheated. I'm getting cheated.
Yeah.
So anyway, I saw it in number 4. I'll be watching it again. Okay, I'm done.
It's the calamity of comparison. When we try to compare ourselves to somebody else rather than looking at God and saying, like you said, Dad, what does God want? Kind of thing. Excuse me. And I loved what Jesus said there. It was the kingdom of heaven has a different calculus. And I
Ah,
thought, yeah, it's true. It's
yeah.
so true. And how it's measured. I think the other thing that he said, there's people are not measured by what they deserve. And that's when we have to go back to what Jesus was telling was a parable. It was a story. Parables aren't meant to be direct correlation to daily life. Like that's how I should run my business. That's not what the parable is talking about. It's not talking about how do you run a business. It's talking about the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom of heaven measures differently. The kingdom of heaven proportions differently, not based on who I am, not based on what I've done, but based on who God is. And Jesus was showing that. And then even with Mary and Martha, and I agree, I loved the way he played that out, because I always feel like I've always been a Martha. I've always been a Martha. I'm making sure everything gets done, kind of thing, rather than sitting at the feet of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I'm learning more the value and the benefit and the beauty of sitting with Jesus and not worrying about the dishes or the meal or whatever. But it's hard because I want to get all that stuff done. And it isn't in the scriptural passage that Jesus consoles Martha. In fact, you really don't you see him basically just give her some pretty harsh words. But I'm glad that Dallas added a little extra text there and made Martha feel not so bad. Because again, there's nothing wrong with service. She was serving, and Jesus was about service, and he modeled service, washing feet and that kind of a thing. That there's value in there, but his point was, I'm only here for a short time. Take advantage of the fact that I'm here. Spend it with me. And that's kind of my takeaway is like that constant reminder of I'm not always going to have this dynamic with God here on earth in this body doing this. At some point in eternity, it's going to be a completely different kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to take advantage of what it's like here and now and experience what he wants me to experience here and now. The struggle with staying focused, the struggle with keeping my eyes on Jesus, the struggle with all of those things that will teach me so that when I get to that place, when I'm hanging out with him and we're in heaven and all of the resistance is gone, I'm enjoying it all the much more. But yeah, I thought the episode did a good job of kind of getting the essence of what Jesus was doing.
When you were talking, I was thinking about that's what I am. I'm one of the. I felt my job. If Johnny was speaking or somebody was speaking, I was making sure that everything else was taken care of. Was the lighting right? Was this right? Was that? And I missed out on a lot of it. And sometimes afterwards they say, "Did you catch when so and so said this or said that?" And oh yeah, that was great. Just. But I was more worried about service. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, Jim. Bob, go ahead.
No. It's an interesting point, because we do have in the actual story, it's a one-off. In other words, Jesus is there, and he's saying, "As long as I'm here, this is important."
Yeah.
He's not here. Okay, so now it becomes more of what you're talking about, which is when you're in various moments, are you missing the importance of a moment, whether it's with kids, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with friends, whether it's with acquaintances, strangers? Are we missing that moment because we deem that something else might be more important? You know, and how do we value that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's more that's more what I tend to think about, because it's a one-off. He goes, well, as long as I'm here, this is important. Well, Jesus is gone, so that story doesn't, I get it. But yes, the storytelling aspect that Dallas brings is, I like where he goes with these things. He kind of stretches our thinking and says, well, if it's not being disingenuous to the story.
Right.
Actually, it's interesting because it actually shows what one would think the character of Jesus would actually say as well, which I kind of liked. But those moments of when you're in a moment, what's the most important thing to do? Jimmy, I think one of the biggest compliments that I can give you that has impressed me the most is that when you're there, you're 100% there, wherever there is. That when you're at work, that's your focus, and that I admire that. That's an important thing. And then when you're with your family, you're with your family. When you're with your wife, you're with your wife. We get those challenges where when I'm with her, well, I want to make sure that this happens and that happens and that kind of stuff. And that's we want to complete the event. We have a vision, some idea that how it's going to happen. Where me, I'm more flyby. I'm like, when we get there, we'll figure it out, And and so it's to be fair, I raise my hand, honest and true, wherever there it goes, but I like that, and it's something that I think maybe we can take some thought to is those moments we're talking about here, where they're with Jesus, but we're with with whomever we're with at. Are they getting the attention that we should be giving them?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whether it's us telling a story or whether it's listening to them tell a story. It's both sides, right?
Yeah.
Not that that's one of those little things to take. So, yeah, I like that. Daddy?
what we just talked about, I've got written down here. We work so hard to look good when knowing Him should be our goal. Works of service are good. Being present with Him is the best.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting and reading my quiet time in the morning, I'm reading scripture or listening to Tim and John or reading a devotional that I
Mhm.
get. Um, am I weaving him into all of that? Because that's what's so critical to me. When Jesus is talking, um, and then the talk is going on around him,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
all kinds, and he's looking at the people, and he notices Lazarus has got something going on,
Yeah.
and his head is just in a different place. It's such a beautiful thing
Mhm.
to see uh, that everybody's having fun, and he's glad they're having fun.
Mhm.
But his eye catches Lazarus, and then he needs to um, do something. It's working in his head on
Mhm.
it. And there's so much there that unfolds, but it's the fact that it's the people around him that he's constantly paying attention to. It isn't the event, it's the people involved in the event.
Mhm.
And I remember one of the times that we used to meet somewhere and watch a race, whether it was in Bristol or
Mhm.
Miracle, the Monster Mile or whatever, and
Mhm.
we go there and Jim gets a phone call that Ashley hurt herself,
Yeah.
and there was no question. He just looked
Mhm.
at me and said, "Can you get my flight changed?" And Bob and I are going, um,
There's a
let,
race going on.
yeah, how can we talk him out of this? Because there was never a question in your mind of what you were going to do, and and we were trying to be self-righteous about it the rest of the time when you were gone. You know that she didn't really need him. All this kind of stuff, but uh,
Mhm.
Bob mentioned it a few
Yeah.
minutes ago. But I just remember when things, and I'm trying to be more that way.
Mm.
That I see the person
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
crowd, not the crowd.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And who is God? What I haven't really prayed about it, but it's been something I've thought about praying. Okay, Lord, I'm going to the church service this morning. Who do you have for me to talk to? And
Mm.
the uh, service starts, and they start singing, and I'm hearing a noise, and I can't figure what the heck is that noise. It sounds like it's somebody's got their phone on, and as soon as it ends, somebody taps me on the shoulder and points down at my phone. And what I had done is I had turned the service on to see what he was going to talk about, get the Bible verses
Yeah.
and look them up
Yeah.
first and that kind of thing. I was
Mhm.
thinking that sounds really, I'm really cool, man. I'm really getting into this service stuff, boy. And I didn't realize that it was going to be on, and when we stopped and introduced ourselves afterwards, says say hello to somebody. I turned around and I said I'm really sorry, and we all laughed about it. Somebody that I had seen at church a few times. I don't know them, but and so it's I want to focus more on the people there
Mhm.
than the event itself. Because when I ran events, I cared about the air conditioner, whether the air conditioner's working right and things like that. But
Mhm.
I was so busy, as Jim said a little while ago, you're so busy making sure thing running right, you're not really paying attention to the
Yeah.
people there. That the whole reason they came was for what the event's about. Who's ever speaking, who's ever singing, who's ever doing whatever it
Mhm.
was. And I was more caught in, did the event come off right? Was the lighting right? Was the sound right? Was the air conditioning? That kind of thing. And now I don't do that anymore. I mean, that's not my job, but I find myself, is the air conditioning all right? That music sounds a little, I can't hear the person sing. I'm instead of just enjoying
Yeah.
the moment of being in it and hearing the voices, hearing the speaker, and not, because 98% of the people, they don't know any of those, notice any of those other things.
Mhm.
They were involved in that. What they came to hear was their daughter is going to sing a solo this morning.
Mhm.
She wants to hear it, or what the pastor even more well is important. What's the pastor got to say to me?
Mhm.
What is God speaking through him saying to me? And that's what I got out of this episode too. Um, so sorry, I got off on a
Yeah,
skip. Go ahead, Jim.
it's okay. It's good. I want to challenge us a little bit. And Dad, you're the one that got me thinking this direction. Actually, I think it was last week when we were doing our the devotional, the daily devotional, and in my utmost for his highest, Oswald was talking about sometimes we worship our worship more than we worship God. We worship our service more than we worship God. We worship the Bible more than we worship God,
Mhm.
and that it's about God.
Mhm.
And even as you were talking about this episode, and when Jesus saw Lazarus out of the corner of his eye, and you were saying that he's focused on the people. I honestly think Jesus was focused on God, and God drew his attention, and
Hmm.
that our focus should always be on God. And rather than, and the way you said it got me thinking, we want to layer, you're talking about your quiet time in the morning and your worship and that, layering Jesus in, of it's about me and God. How do I layer on top of that these other things? Like I'm spending time with God. Okay, God, where do you want my attention to be?
Hmm.
Where do you want my focus to be? What are we doing here? You know, as I'm looking around, I'm looking with the eyes of God and seeing people and saying, what is God seeing in that person right now? Kinds of stuff. And not even so much, God, what is my part in this? But God, what are you doing? And maybe I don't play a part in it. Maybe he's just bringing my awareness, kind of thing. And Jesus didn't immediately respond to Lazarus. He saw that something was going on. And he had the Holy Spirit, so he knew something, but he chose not to respond in the moment. And so it's all about him and the Father. And then out of that comes the connection with everyone and everything else. As opposed to, and I again use the word juxtaposed, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, all scheming and planning without a thought of God in mind.
Mhm.
They wanted an agenda. Now, I think they were doing it thinking they were doing the right thing, but they were putting um, the right thing above God,
Hmm.
because they,
Hmm.
they wanted to follow the law. They were
Mhm.
worshiping the law rather than
Mhm.
the God who wrote the law.
Mhm.
And so they're literally functioning completely opposite to what Jesus is doing. And
Mhm.
so I saw that strong contrast
Mhm.
in this particular episode.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw another wrench into the mix, because I look back and I see um, a nation being born at Mount Sinai. Okay, and when God is talking to them, and He says, "Your goal is to," actually, He goes back and says, "Remember what I told your forefathers, Abraham, right? That you're there to bless the nations. That they're there to see you as an example of how you live." So they're looking at your daily life. they're not looking at what, because the irony is they're seeing you in daily life. It's not like, oh, well, they're, because they all have all these, like today, all these churches down Church Row, and that's where that's not an example. It's not. No. It is an example. It is very much an example. Let me put that right. It is very much an example. Is that the example that God might be expecting? And I think part of your point is that thought of what can I, when I want to have God's eyes, I want to have God's eyes, I can practice in church. But that's not its purpose. The purpose is not in church. The purpose is the other 6 days of the week. It's that's where it plays out. That's the example they're supposed to see. We're supposed to serve, not us, our community. We're supposed to serve outside of our community. We're supposed to serve the nations. Yes, I think the Sadducees and Pharisees had grown to a point that they thought their priestly role was power. And yet they had missed looking back on their own story and looking back on that priestly job description. Every one of our jobs, you and I, that we've ever had, has a job description. You go back to it and you read it, and sometimes you tell yourself, well, I'm not really doing that, or I do more than that, or, yeah, that's exactly what I do. And in the role the priests are, they're not power. They're not control. It's service, straight up. Some of it, they deal with the sacrifices. Some of them carry tabernacle pieces. Some of them are in charge of the sanctuary cities. Some of them are in the community, helping the community. There's all kinds of roles. All of them are service roles. None of them are power roles. They're not judges. They're not leaders. They're not. But we don't like that. We have a problem with that. And so I think the example that the church is power mongering, and it does. We see it, and it rears its ugly head every 4 years, happens to come around the same cycle as, elections. and it rears its head, and it shows the beast that it is. So sometimes I think part of what's interesting with Torah is that, yes, they had put how they thought you should do X, whatever Torah said to do, put it above the God that it's supposed to reflect. I just got done finishing a script on Torah reflects the character of God. Totally. Which means if you view Torah as an issue, then let's look at what the character of God. So what are you asking? What are you saying that it's doing that you can't do because that wouldn't reflect God? And I hear crickets. I hear very little talk. I think that's a question to ask. I'm looking for answers. I'm looking for people to point something out, please. Because every time I look, and as I'm getting into this more and more, it's that I see the character of God in that. And he defined it. He defined it at the end of Exodus when he's talking to Moses. Right towards the end, he stops and he describes himself. Because that's what's going to define everything that they do. If we're supposed to reflect God as priests, to do the Abrahamic covenant that Paul wrangled us all in with, right? Yeah. Said you Gentiles are now part of the equation. We think it's a group to belong to. And I go, no, it's you've joined a group to serve. We've got it backwards. And we're facing the wrong direction. We're facing into churches when the reality is they should be facing out. Dad, your church, Gateway. And one of its strong points is that it is very outward facing and outward focused. They have meetings, that group where they have these different outward facing support groups, adoptions and all kinds of different things. And the people meet at the churches for people so they can network and get together and see how can we help serve our communities better. And Gateway does a wonderful job, I think, at doing something that we don't see. I think that the church as a role has lost its model in that. And it's encouraging to see a church that starts to bring these people together. They say, hey, maybe it's not us doing it, but we bring the people together, let them work together, and they find out, hey, I can help you here. I can help you there. And so it turns our face there, where I'm not, my prayer closet's to recharge. But if I'm reflecting the image of God, it's not in my church or in my closet. It's in my supermarket, in my food store, when I'm driving. That's a scary thought.
Maybe you, not me. When I'm driving, I don't reflect the character of God at all. But I understand what you're saying.
There you go. Yes, that we're going to go. And that's the thing. And so, Dad, you had a good point that, and I think it goes with the territory, is that unfortunately for churches on a Sunday, we have too many people, like you said, they're making sure something happens, events, making sure something happens. It's interesting. They even addressed that just a little bit when they had their Sermon on the Mount episode where they had him there and they were trying to get things done. And there's a point where he said, stop, sit down and listen, right? He stopped all of that other stuff that was going on. There's a point where you say, because people go and I hear, how many pastors have we heard? How many pastors' kids have we heard that said that's the worst day for their families?
Yeah.
Yep.
That is so ungodly, it's scary.
But
And
isn't that what we just heard in this episode? Exactly what we just heard in this episode.
there you go.
What's the key thing? Yes, we got to eat, we got to this, but what is the key part of it?
There you go.
And that's where it's a fine line that you have to walk, because it's very easy to go to get so caught up as I did in it, and you really need to. I really needed to remember why I was there in the first place. I mean, we gave away wheelchairs, but we're really there to tell them that Jesus loves them. Because a wheelchair in Africa is going to last 6 months to a year, and chances are, out of the house, it'll last less than that because the terrain is so rough.
Yeah.
But somebody cared enough about you to give you that anyway. And they're going to give you a Bible and they're going to tell you why. And that is the is a family, 1 week out of the year, you go to a family retreat, but is to remember how much God loves you and appreciates where you're at, whether you're the person with a disability or you're the person caring for him or you're a volunteer.
Yeah.
And this is what we saw Jesus do. Both of you are doing good things, but when it comes down to it, the most important thing is what? It's listening to what I have to say. And for us, it's reading what Jesus got written down. Or
But then we have to take it out. I mean, the whole point, I'm agreeing, is that, but sometimes we think that that's the key. In other words, that I spend my Sunday and I listen to what the pastor said on Sunday. I said, no. Meaning yes, but only if it faces the other direction. If it never faces the other direction, if your only purpose is to get to the next Sunday to sit in the pew, I think we've missed that point. Jesus' whole point, everything he said was what he's telling you to do is then to take it out. And when he sent them out and do the things, and he's watching them interact, and he's saying, what have I been telling you? Those kind of things in that interactive piece. And we're going to see it reflect as we see this series go.
I had
because that's the key.
I meet with my old friend Greg Partapillo every Tuesday morning, and he told me that he played golf. He plays golf 3 times a week. He's retired. What can I tell you? And he plays with his ex-pastor and one of the elders, and they're playing. And when they get done, because he's got this new guy he listens to online, and it sounds great. I got his name. I'm going to listen to him. But the point is, he says to them that, what are you doing with, this is what are you out there serving? Are you getting, and he got done and he said, what do you think? And I said, well, I think you did a lot of accusing, but you didn't do any question asking. Let me ask you how you feel about serving. What does that mean to you? I'm struggling with that. And allow the other person to respond to it and listen to them. And that's what we do. Well, I should say we, me. That's what I used to do, and I'm trying to do that. And to go along with what you're saying, Robert, is exactly true. We go on Sundays to be reminded or to hear about new opportunities to serve. Am I going to serve the way I did 20 years ago or even 10? No, I'm not going to. But I'm going to find some way, something that where I can use.
Sorry, I don't understand.
My gifts.
Perfect timing.
That was brilliant to wrap this up. That was perfect.
Yeah, it was. It was. It was telling me, be quiet.
There you go. I don't understand. So this is what we're talking about. I like the service, and then how does the focus shift from us taking, because it's a lot of that point where we're asking from God, we're taking. And I get it. There is, because it has to be learned. You have to take. You're sitting at the feet. But there has to be a point where it turns around and he's there. And then when he says, Jesus said all the time, I'm busy. And when he's busy, he's serving. There's the one episode where they're all sitting around the fire, arguing amongst themselves. And Jesus over in a tent healing people in a line as they come up. And you go, I think maybe you're missing the point. Yeah. And so that's some things that we can take this into deal. So we'll have one more episode on this. And we've been talking about it. So possibly we're going to talk a bit about Jesus's Ima. We're going to talk about Jesus's mother, Mary, and an interaction that she has with him towards the end of the episode that I think offers some things for us to listen to ponder, and to maybe really take a listen to how sometimes we want to sometimes throw these guys under the bus and the community as a whole under the bus, and maybe the leaders under the bus, when maybe, again, like them, they just don't understand at a given point. And so there's a lot to be said in that. And I think it's worthy of that discussion. Yeah. So we're going to continue to explore this series. We're going to discuss all these ideas and thoughts as they pop up, because we're loving where this is going. But if you have any questions, you are always welcome to email bob@TheDustyFeet.com, or go to TheDustyFeet.com and leave comments there, and they can be discussed within the community as a whole, right? Because we'll be happy to ponder other ideas and questions as they come up between you or anybody else. So again, thank you to you all. Shalom, shalom. And thanks for with us tonight with Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet.